Deep within the shadowed heart of Germania, in the dense mist-laden Teutoburg forest of 9 AD, Rome suffered a wound that would haunt its empire for generations. 3 legions, 17, 18, and 19, some 20,000 to 25,000 men, including auxiliaries, were obliterated in a catastrophic ambush. Alongside them, 3 sacred legionary eagles, symbols of Roman might, were lost to the mud and blood. Publius Quintilius Varus, the Roman general, remains one of the most devastating military defeats in its history. The sting of Teutoburg burned so fiercely that Emperor Augustus himself, according to historian Suetonius, wandered his palace lamenting, "Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions." For 6 years, Rome nursed its grudge, plotting a fiery retribution. In 15 AD, vengeance arrived with the thunder of hooves and the glint of steel. Germanicus, a commander driven by both duty and fury, led 8 legions, roughly 60,000 to 75,000 men, including allied troops, across the Rhine into the wilds of Germania. This was no mere punitive raid. It was a campaign of devastation. Roman forces razed scores of villages, slaughtering or displacing thousands of Germanic tribespeople. The lands east of the Rhine became a wasteland of ash and ruin. Arminius, the Cherusci chieftain who had orchestrated the Teutoburg ambush, evaded capture but was forced to retreat deep into the forests, his forces battered but unbroken. As winter loomed, Germanicus withdrew his legions, believing the campaign secure, but Arminius was far from defeated. The stage was set for a new clash, one that would echo the horrors of Teutoburg, the Battle of the Long Bridges. Arminius, a master of guerrilla warfare, chose his ground carefully, a network of narrow causeways and bridges stretching across treacherous marshes. The memory of Teutoburg loomed large, but Germanicus's forces, now under the immediate command of Aulus Caecina Severus, were cautious. The Romans divided their efforts. One contingent labored to repair the dilapidated bridges, another guarded the rear, while the main force advanced slowly across the vulnerable causeway. The terrain was a nightmare. Soggy marshes flanked the elevated path, threatening to swallow men, horses, and supplies. Arminius, perched on the high ground with his coalition of tribes, unleashed a devastating tactic. His warriors broke the dikes, sending torrents of water cascading onto the causeway. The flood turned the path into a quagmire, bogging down wagons and trapping soldiers in knee-deep mud. Roman discipline wavered as exhaustion set in. Supplies dwindled, and the wounded piled up, their groans mingling with the eerie howls of Germanic warriors, echoing from the sleep became impossible. Fear gnawed at the Romans, amplified by a chilling vision recorded by Tacitus. Caecina, haunted by a dream of Varus, saw the fallen general bloodied and silent, staring from the darkness. Yet Caecina buried his dread, knowing that morale hung by a thread. At dawn, he issued a desperate order: press forward, no matter the sacrifice. The legions formed a defensive square, with the wounded and supplies sheltered at the center. They inched across the half-repaired bridge, struggling through the mire. Light infantry waded through waist-deep mud on the flanks, their movements sluggish and exposed. The formation began to fracture under the strain. Seizing the moment, Arminius gave the signal, and the forest erupted. Thousands of Germanic warriors surged down the slopes, their war cries shattering the morning. The Roman square buckled as soldiers abandoned their posts to free trapped wagons. Arminius himself led a daring charge toward the center, aiming for Caecina and his officers. The general narrowly escaped death, saved by a last-ditch surge of Roman reinforcements. The legions teetered on the brink of collapse. Soldiers discarded their shields, abandoned the wounded, and fled toward their starting point, half-starved and freezing in the autumn chill. That night, in a makeshift camp, panic reigned. A single horse breaking free sparked. Rome had clawed back a victory, their first true triumph in Germania since Teutoburg, but the cost was staggering. Caecina's legions, battered and depleted, could not sustain the campaign. With supplies exhausted and winter closing in, he ordered a retreat to the Rhine. The march was a grim procession, the soldiers limping through forests that had become mass graves for their comrades. At the Rhine, panic gripped the Roman frontier. Rumors of another Teutoburg spread like wildfire, and terrified civilians demanded the destruction of the Rhine bridge to halt any Germanic pursuit. Agrippina, Germanicus's wife, emerged as a pillar of resolve. Stationed at the bridge, she forbade its demolition and organized relief efforts, distributing food, bandages, and cloaks to the ragged survivors. Caecina's men, stranded in the marshes, endured a night of misery. Hungry, cold, and many stripped of armor. At dawn, they dragged themselves toward a river where Germanicus waited with a fleet. In chaos, they scrambled aboard the ships, rumors swirling that the entire force had perished. Only when Germanicus himself appeared, standing tall on the deck, did the survivors believe they had escaped the jaws of defeat. The legions limped back to the frontier, their return less a triumph than a desperate act of survival. In the distant provinces of Gaul, Hispania, and Italy, tales of heroism still circulated, fueling donations of horses, weapons, and coin to sustain the war effort. But those on the Rhine knew the truth. Germania's forests had humbled Rome twice. The empire was beginning to learn a bitter lesson. Some lands cannot be subdued by force alone, just as modern empires have discovered that tanks and drones cannot impose order on defiant nations.